The Albino sisters. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone square in Charleston, South Carolina. It was the spring of 1858, and the air carried the scent of magnolia blossoms mixed with the salt breeze from the harbor. In the center of the square stood a wooden platform that had seen too many heartbreaks to count. On this particular morning, 3 young women stood upon that platform, their pale skin almost luminous in the gentle sunlight. Their white hair caught the breeze like spun silk, and their light eyes held a quiet dignity that seemed to shine from within. These were the Whitmore sisters. Grace, the eldest at 22, Mary at 19, and little Sarah, barely 16. The sisters had been born different in a world that often feared what it didn't understand. Their albinism made them stand out like candles in the darkness, and their master, a cruel man named Jeremiah Blackwood, had decided their uniqueness made them valuable in ways that chilled the soul. Grace held her sister's hands tightly as the crowd gathered below. She had always been their protector, their strengths when the world seemed too harsh to bear. Her voice was soft but steady as she whispered to them, "Whatever happens, we stay together. We are sisters, and nothing can change that." Mary, with her gentle heart and quick mind, nodded silently. She had spent countless nights reading to Sarah by candlelight, teaching her younger sister to find hope in stories when reality offered little. Sarah, despite her youth, possessed a spirit that refused to be broken. Her eyes held a spark that reminded anyone who looked closely that she was more than her circumstances. The auctioneer, a thin man with a voice like gravel, began calling out descriptions that reduced human beings to mere property. The crowd pressed closer, and Grace felt Sarah's hand tremble in hers. She squeezed it reassuringly, drawing on a strength she didn't know she possessed. Then, from the back of the crowd, a figure emerged. He was a tall man with kind eyes and clothes that spoke of comfortable means but not ostentatious wealth. His name was Thomas Morrison, and he was not like the other men who had come to bid that day, where others saw curiosities or worse. He saw 3 young women who deserved dignity and respect. Thomas had come to Charleston on business, but something about the sisters called to his heart. Perhaps it was the way Grace stood protectively in front of her siblings, or the quiet courage he saw in all 3 faces. As a widower with no children of his own, he understood loneliness and the deep human need for family. The bidding began, and Thomas found himself raising his hand again and again. Other bidders dropped out as the price climbed higher, muttering about the cost not being worth it for peculiar slaves. But Thomas continued, his jaw set with determination. He wasn't buying property, he was purchasing freedom, though the sisters didn't know it yet. When the gavel finally fell, Thomas Morrison had won. The sisters looked at him with a mixture of hope and fear, unsure what their future would hold. Grace straightened her shoulders and met his gaze directly, ready to face whatever came next, if it meant protecting Mary and Sarah Dart. Thomas approached the platform slowly, his movements careful and non-threatening. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "I'm Thomas Morrison," he said simply, "and I want you to know that your lives are about to change." The journey to Thomas's plantation took 2 days by carriage. Unlike their previous experience, this journey was comfortable. Thomas provided food, water, and rest stops. He spoke to them as people, asking about their health and comfort. The sisters remained cautious but began to sense that this man was different from their former master. Thomas's plantation, called Riverside, sat on rolling hills overlooking a peaceful river. The house was modest but well-maintained, with wide porches and gardens that bloomed with careful attention. As their carriage rolled up the drive, the sisters saw workers in the fields who looked up and waved, their faces showing none of the fear or resentment they had grown accustomed to seeing. That evening, Thomas called the 3 sisters to his study. The room was lined with books and warmed by a gentle fire. He gestured to chairs arranged in a comfortable circle and waited until they were seated before speaking. "I want you to understand something," Thomas began, his voice steady and sincere. "You are not my slaves. You are not my property. You are free women, and you are welcome to stay here as long as you choose, or leave whenever you wish." The words hung in the air like a prayer answered. Grace blinked back tears she had held for years. Mary gasped softly, and Sarah's eyes grew wide with wonder. Thomas continued, "I know this may be hard to believe after everything you've endured, but I have legal papers being drawn up to formalize your freedom. In the meantime, I offer you a home here at Riverside. You may work if you choose, and I will pay fair wages. You may pursue education, crafts, or whatever interests you. This is your choice now." Grace found her voice first. "Why?" she asked, the word carrying the weight of years of suffering and mistrust. "Why would you do this for us?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, gazing into the fire. Because it's right, he said, simply because every person deserves dignity and choice. And because, he paused, his voice growing softer, I believe God put you three in my path for a reason. The sisters spent their first weeks at Riverside in a state of careful wonder. They were given a comfortable cottage near the main house, with clean beds, warm blankets, and windows that looked out on gardens where they were free to walk. Grace slowly began to relax her guard. Mary discovered Thomas's extensive library, and Sarah found joy in helping with the horses that, as spring turned to summer, the sisters bloomed like flowers that had finally found good soil. Grace revealed a talent for managing household affairs and became an invaluable help to Thomas. Mary devoured books and began teaching the plantation children to read and write. Sarah's gentle way with animals made her a favorite in the stables. The local community took longer to accept the arrangement, but Thomas's quiet determination and the sisters' own dignity gradually won over most of the neighbors. Some would never approve, but the sisters found they cared less about those opinions as their confidence grew. One evening in late summer, as the three sisters sat on their cottage porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, Grace spoke. The words that had been growing in all their hearts. We're home, she said softly, and her sisters nodded in agreement. Mary looked up from the book in her lap, her eyes bright with contentment. I never thought I would say that word and mean it, Sarah, now taller and stronger than when they arrived, smiled as she watched a pair of rabbits play in the garden. Do you think we'll always be safe here? She asked. Grace considered the question seriously, as she always did. I think, she said finally, that we're not just safe here, we're alive here. For the first time, we're truly alive. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the three sisters sat in comfortable silence, each lost in thoughts of the journey that had brought them to this place of peace. They had stood on an auction block in fear and uncertainty, but love and unexpected kindness had transformed their fate. Thomas Morrison had given them more than freedom. He had given them the chance to discover who they really were when fear was removed from their lives. And in return, they had given him something he hadn't realized he was missing, a family bound not by blood alone, but by choice, respect, and genuine care. The Albino sisters, as the townspeople sometimes still called them, had found their place in the world at last. And in finding it, they had shown everyone around them that true worth was never about appearance or circumstances, but about the strength of the human spirit and the power of love to overcome even the deepest darkness.